Pokemon Sword and Shield had its debut in 2019, and with the initial release of the game, it left us unsatisfied with the limited methods of shiny hunting we had available. However, many people, including myself, overlooked a feature that many just passed off as useless. This feature is made available to you when you depart for the wild area for your very first time, and that feature is Pokemon Camp. Much of the player base doesn't know this, but there's actually a way to shiny hunt inside of Pokemon Camp. You may be questioning how that's even possible, and luckily for you, I'll be giving you answers to those questions in this complete, in-depth video guide on how to shiny hunt via Pokemon Camp and Curry encounters. Before we start, I'd just like to mention that there are timestamps in the video description for your viewing pleasures. If there's anything in specific you need, then make sure to check the video chapters for your desired topic. With that all said, let's hop right into our guide. Curry hunting is a method where you cook curries for your Pokemon in Pokemon Camp, for the off chance that a wild Pokemon may appear, indicated by the bubbles with 3 dots above its head. Due to this off chance, I'm going to be giving you a disclaimer about curry hunting before you even begin, as it's a very long and tedious hunt, which doesn't give out consistent results while hunting. Despite it being a hard hunt to do, you probably want to know how wild Pokemon come to your camp in the first place. Unfortunately, it's not that easy to explain, so I'll be elaborating on how they come to your camp further on in the video. The Pokemon that come to your camp wield a special mark called the Curry Connoisseur mark. This mark gives your Pokemon a special title that, when sent out, reads the Curry Connoisseur. This mark is the whole reason why people hunt via Curry in the first place, as the Curry mark is only obtainable via this method. Many of you probably want to know the shiny odds and key details for the hunt before you even begin to prepare for it, so we'll go right on ahead and talk about that. When shiny Pokemon come to your camp, they have a 1 in 4,096 chance of being shiny. This means that Curry encounters are full odds. The shiny charm does not work on these types of encounters, similar to how they don't work with the Regis. Like the Regis, Currymons have a 15 out of 16 chance to be a star shiny and a 1 in 16 chance to be a square shiny. Since the Pokemon have a mark, you may think the mark charm has an effect on them. Sadly, this isn't the case, as the way they appear in camp is entirely based upon a different factor. Since you know the odds now, let's move on to some of the setup, details, and requirements you need to do before you can cook your first pot of curry. Though this method seems simple on paper, there's quite a bit you need to know in order to achieve the proper requirements for the hunt. There are 4 key things to know and gather before you start, which is how the Pokemon you camp with contribute to the hunt, Pokeballs, your selection of berries to use for cooking, and your selection of ingredients to use for cooking. The berries and ingredients used will differ depending on if you soft reset your game after cooking, or choose to continue cooking and using ingredients without closing your game. The berry and ingredient criteria for both forms of hunting will be discussed when we get to the respective berries and ingredients section. Now that you're aware of the things we're going to be discussing, let's get right into how the Pokemon you camp with contribute to your hunt. The party of Pokemon you select to hunt with will be vital to ensure that your curry hunting experience will be as smooth as humanly possible. You're going to want to seek out 6 Pokemon to use for your curry hunting team, and these Pokemon preferably will stay as your selected team for your entire hunt. The Pokemon that you select should all be small and short, or hover significantly off the ground. Some examples that fit that criteria would be Pokemon like Stunfisk, Sizzlipede, Joltik, Beautyfly, Rotom, or Milcery. Picking these Pokemon with the specific characteristics mentioned are extremely important, and this is for one very crucial reason. Here on screen, you can see the seemingly normal camp, but what you may not realize is that there is actually a Pokemon sitting right behind that Wooloo. And what could it be, you may ask? Well, it turns out it was a shiny Curry Badoo just completely hidden behind Wooloo. This hunter is extremely fortunate to have noticed that there was a Pokemon behind Wooloo, and could have lost a shiny to that tiny fatal flaw. That's why it's important to select Pokemon with the aforementioned characteristics. A team I've used that has worked out great is this team right here, and as you can see, they all consist of small Pokemon. Feel free to use these Pokemon as a base when trying to build a team to use. Using small Pokemon has the benefit of not blocking wild Pokemon. but also to prevent a major glitch from occurring. You see, some curry hunters were just minding their own business when they discovered that using large Pokemon in your party can have a bizarre effect on the wild Pokemon you encounter. Presumably due to a hitbox bug, the large Pokemon literally turn into and become the wild Pokemon, effectively overriding the wild Pokemon and deleting it from existence. Of course, for a shiny hunter, that means the potential loss of a shiny Pokemon. The Pokemon listed on screen right now are the Pokemon we have confirmed this bug to work with. Despite only finding a select few Pokemon this bug works on, I suggest you stay away from any large flying Pokemon like Articuno, Zapdos, Talonflame, Togekiss, and Eternatus, just to name a few. For more information on this glitch, please refer to the video made by fellow curry hunter Spike Oriendo, where he goes into depth about how this glitch occurs and what the side effects of it are. Now, bugs and glitches aside, you should now have your party of 6 Pokemon and are now able to move on to the next step, which would be increasing their sociability stat. You may be questioning what this sociability stat is, and I have the answers for you. The sociability stat is an invisible stat that is applied to your Pokemon the more they socialize and do activities with each other in camp. This stat is a set number that starts at 0 and caps at 255, where, depending on the activity that is performed in camp, will gain a certain amount of sociability. If you're still confused, think about it like the friendship stat, where the value caps at 255 and slowly increases from 0, depending on the time you spend and activities you do with your Pokemon. Each Pokemon has their own sociability stat, and it's important to note the 255 value cap, as once that cap is reached, it's what will allow you to encounter wild Pokemon in camp. It's also important to note that you have 2 or more Pokemon in your party, as only having 1 Pokemon in your party will not allow you to gain sociability by any means. Now, sociability can be gained in a multitude of ways, but by far the most important and really only meaningful way to increase sociability is through cooking curries. Each curry class gives a Pokemon a set amount of sociability points depending on its quality, and we'll go over how much you get per class. For Coughing class, you only get 5 sociability points per curry. For Wobbuffet class, you only get 7 sociability points per curry. For Milcery class, you only get 10 sociability points per curry. For Copperaja class, you only get 15 sociability points per curry. And finally, by far the best way of getting sociability is by using Charizard class, which gains you 20 sociability points per curry. Now clearly, Charizard class curries are the best way to raise sociability, but many people have trouble even getting it, especially even by themselves. The best advice I can give is to enter NPC camps and cook with them to try and farm Charizard class curries, or seek out some help by requesting to cook some curries in people's camps online. When making curries to increase their sociability, I would recommend writing down the sociability your Pokemon gains depending on the curries you make, so that you're able to actively track how many sociability points your Pokemon has at a time. I suggest this because there's no way to check sociability using an NPC, unlike the friendship stat. There is, however, a way to check the sociability of 2 Pokemon at the same time inside a Pokemon camp. Inside a Pokemon camp, you can call over 2 Pokemon and talk to them at the same time. They will give you a bunch of different messages, but we only care about one. This message will read, Pokemon A and Pokemon B seem to be best friends. This is how you'll know those Pokemon are both capped out at 255 points, if you have not actively been tracking their sociability points. An interesting trait about the sociability stat is that the more party members you have in your party, the less sociability it takes for Pokemon to spawn in your camp. If you've been following the guide, you should have 6 Pokemon, which require an average of 200 sociability points. This average is calculated the same way any other average would be. Add up the sociability of your 6 Pokemon, then divide them by the number of Pokemon you have. So 6. If that number is 200 plus, then you can get curry spawns. The less and less Pokemon you have in your party, the more sociability you need in order to get a spawn. If you have 5 Pokemon, you need an average of 210 plus sociability points. If you have 4 Pokemon, you need an average of 220 plus sociability points. If you have 3 Pokemon, you need an average of 230 plus sociability points. If you have 2 Pokemon, you need an average of 240 plus sociability points. if you have one Pokemon, you need 250 plus sociability points. It's no hassle to use any amount of Pokemon you want, but 6 Pokemon are optimal to get your hunt started faster and more efficiently. It's also recommended that you go over the minimum amount of points required, depending on your party size, as if your Pokemon start a fight in camp, their sociability points will steadily decline. It's also because of this that I suggest you do not AFK inside a camp, as your Pokemon could start a fight and lose sociability without you even noticing. Some extra information about the sociability stat is that it does not reset when trading to a friend, unlike the friendship stat. This means you can even get a friend to build up sociability for your Pokemon and send it back to you to use with no problem. Also, mentioning the friendship stat, we now know this value is not needed for curry encounters, despite what I said in my first curry hunting guide. Hopefully you now understand what requirements you need for your Pokemon. Since you're ready to start seeing curry spawns, let's talk about how Pokeballs work for these unique encounters. Pokeballs work in a very unique way when it comes to curry shiny hunting. There are only 3 possible Pokeballs that can be used, and these are Pokeballs, Great Balls, and Ultra Balls. Apricorn Balls or any other gimmick ball does not work for curry encounters. The Pokeball selected for the wild Pokemon will be the one in your bag with the lowest value, which means Pokeballs will be automatically selected out of the 3 available choices. If you have no Pokeballs in your bag, Great Balls will be used. If you don't have Pokeballs or Great Balls, Ultra Balls will be used. Now, you may be wondering what happens if you have none of these 3 Pokeballs in your bag. Well, surprisingly, a wild encounter is not able to spawn at all. This means you better keep your Pokeball supply up while hunting. That is if you aren't going to be soft resetting your game. You don't even have to accept the Pokemon to your party, as Pokemon Camp gives you the feature to kick the wild Pokemon off back into the wild. Be warned though, as once you select no, the Pokemon is never coming back. Hopefully you understand what Pokeballs you need and how they function in camp. So now we'll move on to our next resource and final resource you need to gather, which is your berries and ingredients. Now first and foremost, the berries and ingredients you're going to be collecting will greatly differ depending on if you're soft resetting or not soft resetting. So it's vital to determine which method you're going to use before hunting. Soft resetting allows you to use precious berries and ingredients at no expense, which will further allow you to make higher quality curries for your hunt. Not soft resetting allows you to keep every single Pokemon you'll encounter in this hunt, but with the expense of, well, expenses. It also allows you to develop an insane amount of curries cooked in your curry decks if you're even interested in that. Personally, I'd recommend soft resetting to ensure your curry hunting is less expensive and more rewarding, but it always comes down to personal preference. Anyways, now that you've decided which method you're going to be using, it's time to collect the resources for the respective methods. Let's start with figuring out which berries you'll use. An important concept to understand is how the rarity of each berry works. Each berry has a specific rarity, and the rarity we want to aim for is whatever is most realistic for each method. The rarity of a berry can range from a value between 1 and 30, and the higher the berry rarity is, the better quality your curry will be. I'll leave a spreadsheet on berry rarity in the description below if you want a better look. If you're soft resetting, you'll want to use the rarest berries you can find. The berry that holds the highest rarity value is the Starf berry at 30 points, which can be best obtained by date skipping in front of the Snowslide Slope Watt Trader and cycling his daily trades. It's important to note, however, that this trade is fairly rare to see, so it's not worth your time to reset for it when you can easily grind other berries that will give you a much similar rarity. The best place to grind for rare berries are the trees in the Crown Tundra, and specifically this one at the connecting river between Valimir Lake and the Giant's Bed that I have used a ton for my own hunt. This tree drops these 3 20-point rarity berries listed on screen, as well as these 4 5-point rarity berries. If you don't have access to any of the DLCs, the maximum berry rarity you can get from trees are only 5-point rarity berries. I'd recommend using this tree in the Lake of Outrage that drops 6 different 5-point rarity berries. Note that you'll need to have the water bike in order to access this area. You can efficiently grind berries from these trees using the YCOM date skip method, which I'll link in the description below. The amount of berries you collect from each of these trees is entirely dependent on how often you want to reset, but I'd recommend getting a minimum of 10 specific berries. Make sure to keep an eye on how fast the tree is shaking, as it has 3 levels of shake: neutral, aggressive, and violent. Once the tree starts shaking violently, immediately back out and stop shaking the tree so Pokemon doesn't fall on you and take your berries. Now obviously getting these berries if you're not soft resetting is completely unviable, as you'd just be grinding more than you'd be hunting. The unfortunate drawback of not wanting to soft reset is that you'll be forced to use berries that have a rarity level of only 1. This is because these are the only berry types you can actually buy in bulk. There are 2 traders in the game that offer these berries, with one on the main Galar Island and the other on the Isle of Armor. The seller on the main Galar Island is located at Wedgehurst, just beside the boutique. He offers 3 different kinds of 1-point rarity berries. The seller on the Isle of Armor is located just outside the Battle Dojo. She offers 4 different kinds of 1-point rarity berries. When buying these berries, buy each kind in bulk at 999 each. The Isle of Armor trader is obviously preferred, as she can give you a maximum of 3,996 berries at a time, compared to Wedgehurst's 2,997 maximum. Now that you have the berries you'll need depending on whatever method you would like to use, we can move on to the ingredients you'll need. Now ironically, the ingredients for each method only vary extremely slightly, so it should be more straightforward than the berries. Just like the berries, ingredients also have their own rarity. This time, they're ranked with a star rating, with the lowest rarity being 1 star and the highest rarity being 10 star. For both methods, the lowest rarity ingredient should be at 4 stars, and not any lower. The higher the ingredient rarity is, the better quality your curry will be. Unlike berries, ingredients play an extremely massive role on what the final grade of your curry will be. That's why I say the minimum rarity of the ingredients you should have is 4 stars, which is the second highest ingredient rarity. Again, the spreadsheet for the ingredient rarity is in the description below. If you're soft resetting, you'll want to try your absolute hardest to use the ingredient known as Gigantomix. This ingredient sits at a 10-star rarity level and can be obtained in 2 ways, with one being miles easier than the other. The first way is to get it via 3, 4, or 5-star raid dens at an extremely low drop rate. The other way is by date skipping in front of the Snowslide Slope Watt Trader and cycling his daily trades. The Snowslide Slope Watt Trader's Gigantomix trade is fairly common, so it's very viable to date skip in front of him and get as many Gigantomixes as you can at a time. You can date skip in front of him using the YCOM date skip method, which again is linked in the description below. If you don't want to test the odds of you actually getting Gigantomix, you can go for the second and more consistent option, at the expense of your ingredient rarity. In Sword and Shield there are 6 kinds of 4-star ingredients, with them being Smoke Poke Tail, Moo Cheese, Fruit Bunches, Boiled Eggs, Fancy Apples, and Large Leeks. Since you're soft resetting, the most budget-friendly items you can get your hands on in the base game are the Fancy Apples and Large Leeks. This is because you can find them for free scattered across the wild area, with Large Leeks being found in the Giant's Cap, and Fancy Apples being found primarily in the Dappled Grove. If you have access to the Isle of Armor DLC, you can actually grind 4-star ingredients there much more efficiently. Once you've upgraded the dojo with honey for the 7th time after spending a grand total of 255,000 watts, you'll unlock the ability to pull up 5 curry ingredients per day from the kitchen fridges for free. The ingredients the fridge offers are the ones listed on this menu, where 3 out of the 4 ingredients are 4-star ingredients. Fruit bunches are conveniently placed at the top of the list, so all we need to do is spam the A button until Honey yells at us to shut the fridge and stop being so greedy. Combine collecting these ingredients with time skipping using the YCOM date skip method, and you're looking at a much faster way to get your ingredients, instead of gathering them from the wild area. You only have to grind the ingredients that you'd like to use once, as soft resetting during your hunt makes them infinitely disposable. I'd recommend collecting as many as you can to lessen the amount of time you need to soft reset. Collecting your ingredients via the wild area or through the Battle Dojo fridge also means you won't pay a single Poké for any 4-star ingredient, which usually runs you at a steep 2,200 Poké per ingredient. Obviously, just like the berry situation, if you want to not soft reset and decide to collect your ingredients those ways, you'll be grinding more than hunting. Since you're not soft resetting, you'll be better off purchasing your 4-star ingredients from sellers around the game. There are 3 collective sellers in the game that offer you curry ingredients for sale. The first trader is located just in front of the meetup spot in the wild area. You'll find him located underneath a tree in the rolling fields. The second trader is located just outside of Hammerlock in the Hammerlock Hills. You can find him just to the right of the Hammerlock entrance. The final trader is locked to the DLC in the Isle of Armor. You can find him right outside the battle dojo right beside the berry trader we mentioned earlier. All of these traders only have a chance to offer you a 4-star ingredient, and what they offer will cycle daily. This means you can either date skip and try to get a trade for a 4-star ingredient, or just wait it out normally. I'd recommend buying 999, or as many as you can, of a single 4-star ingredient, as they'll be used up fairly slowly compared to berries. Obviously, the 2,200 Poké Dollars per 1 ingredient situation is extremely costly. What I'd recommend you doing is trying out a money exploit by buying luxury balls from Watt traders and selling them back for a profit. The link to that tutorial is in the description below. Now, with the lengthy information about Pokemon, sociability, Poké Balls, berries, and ingredients all out of the way, you're finally able to start your hunt. In this next section, we'll go over the locations you can hunt, the encounter rates for each Pokemon, as well as some additional info you should know about encountering Pokemon in your hunt. Before we get into the locations, there's some things that should be made clear about encounters when going into your hunt. The Pokemon you see in camp cannot be altered in any way, which means abilities like Flash Fire, Illuminate, or Synchronize, as well as Pokedex recommendations, don't do anything for curry encounters. You also cannot encounter Pokemon in your camp if you're in an NPC camp, in the wild area, Isle of Armor, or Crown Tundra, as they are coded not to appear there under any circumstance. Since you can't hunt in any of the wild areas, that means you also can't hunt with your friends online. It's important to note that the Pokemon you encounter will have the exact same IVs, levels, and abilities as any normal wild Pokemon in that area. Now, with the side information out of the way, I'll show you each area a curry Pokemon can be encountered in. Here's a little example of the encounter charts that will come up. You'll be able to see the encounter percentage of that Pokemon right beside its sprite, as well as on the far right, it will indicate which game these encounter tables are for. If both the sword and shield logo are present, it means the encounter table stays the same for both games. Now, here are the following encounter tables for each Pokemon you can find in each location. Slumbering Weald, Deep Slumbering Weald, Route 1, Sword Route 2, Shield Route 2, Sword Route 2 Lake, Shield Route 2 Lake, Sword Galar Mine, Shield Galar Mine, Route 4, Sword Route 5, Shield Route 5, Sword Galar Mine number 2, Shield Galar Mine number 2, Sword Motostoke Outskirts, Shield Motostoke Outskirts, Sword Route 6, Shield Route 6, Sword Glimwood Tangle, Shield Glimwood Tangle, Sword Route 7, Shield Route 7, Route 8, Sword Steamdrift Way, Shield Steamdrift Way, Route 9, Chirchester Bay, Outer Spikemuth, Sword White Hill Station, Shield White Hill Station, Sword Route 10, and lastly, Shield Route 10. Those are all the locations you can curry hunt on in Sword and Shield. Now, hopefully you figured out where you'd like to hunt, as now it's finally time to begin cooking your curries, which we'll talk about in this next section. Now, out of all the sections I've covered, this one is definitely the one that can differ the most in terms of how you do it, as not every single person will have the same resources or capabilities to reach the perfect curry. One thing that remains the same, however, is the spawn rate of Pokemon depending on the class your curry is. The higher your curry class goes, the more likely you are to encounter a wild Pokemon in camp. A Coughing class curry only gives you a 1% chance of a wild Pokemon spawning in your camp. A Wobbuffet class curry gives you a 5% chance of a wild Pokemon spawning in your camp. A Milcery class gives you a 15% chance of a wild Pokemon spawning in your camp. A Copperajah class gives you a 20% chance of a wild Pokemon spawning in your camp. And finally, a Charizard class gives you a 25% chance of a wild Pokemon spawning in your camp. If you aren't soft resetting, the maximum class you can get is a Copperajah class, given the ingredients you've collected. If you are soft resetting, however, collecting the highest quality ingredients will make getting a Charizard class curry very viable. Now, you may be wondering why aiming for a Charizard class curry for only a 5% boost in spawns is so important for soft resetting. And that's because that 5% actually makes an insane difference in the amount of Pokemon you see over the span of your hunt compared to Copperajah class. Now that we have the spawn rates for Pokemon depending on the class you get, we now know that we need to aim for the highest class possible depending on whatever method you've chosen. The way to play the minigame remains the same between both methods, and I'll explain how you can optimally play the minigame to get the highest class every time. First thing we need to do is select our berries and ingredients, and specifically in this section, it's where it may differ depending on the resources you've gathered. Since it's not a uniform choice for everyone, I'd suggest taking a moment to join our Curry Connoisseurs Discord server, so you can ask for help on what ingredients and berries you should use given what you have, as we'd be more than glad to help you out. In this situation, I'll be telling you the absolute best combination of ingredients you should be using to maximize your curry class outcome, depending on your method. For soft resetting, the best combination you can use is 10 of your 20-point rarity berries and a bottle of Giganimix. For not soft resetting, the best combination you can use is 10 of your 1-point rarity berries and any 4-star ingredient you have in bulk. Now that you've selected your components, the first task you'll be prompted to do is fan the flames with your A button. The flames have levels, which are level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. You're going to want to aim to keep your flame at level 3, but if you manage to make it to level 4, don't stay at level 4 for too long, as you'll burn your curry. You may find it difficult to reach a flame level of 3, so I would suggest mashing the ZR, ZL, and A buttons all at the same time to maximize your fanning speed. If you're using motion controls, wave your hand quickly and sharply. You could also even put some spare change aside and invest in a turbo controller, so it spans the A button automatically for you if you're truly dedicated to curry hunting. After the fanning process, you'll then be asked to stir your curry. The rhythm you want to keep is 2 stirs per second, which should make sparkles come out of your pot. If you splash it a few times, don't worry, but don't do it too much as it may ruin your curry grade. Finally, after stirring, you'll be asked to put some love into your creation. This is the most crucial part, as it's the biggest factor in what determines your curry grade. The best place to put your heart is when the closing circle sits just at the light green ring. You have to press A about half a second before your closing circle reaches the inner green line to get your perfect placement. Placing your curry heart like this will make your curry class stay consistent. And voila! You've become a master at making curries. Getting the rhythm down takes a lot of practice, but once you get the hang of it, you'll be flying through curries in no time. And now, hopefully, you understand the ins and outs of curry hunting. I genuinely hope that this video has helped you in your journey to shiny hunt in a unique way. And of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments below. It would also mean a lot if you could like this video and subscribe, as it would help me out a ton. Also, like mentioned before, consider joining our Discord server to become a part of an amazing community and learn even more about curry shiny hunting. Now, with that all said, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you all around very soon. and I wish you all the best of luck on your curry hunts.